In about 3 hours, the Federal Reserve announces its rate decision, and Kevin Warsh holds his first press conference as chair. Trump says the Iran deal is all signed. Iran's own president says it hasn't taken shape. And the Iranian national soccer team was given 5 hours of security checks to travel 90 minutes from Tijuana to Los Angeles, then ordered out of the country within hours of the final whistle. No recovery night, no explanation. 3 stories where the official version and the documented version don't match. Start with the Fed, because what happens at 2 p.m. Eastern today matters more than the headline will suggest. The rate decision itself isn't really in question. CME FeedWatch data put the odds of a hold at 3.50 to 3.75% at roughly 97% as of last week. This is Warsh's first meeting as chair, his first summary of economic projections, his first dot plot, and his first press conference at 2:30. Markets are not watching the number, they're watching everything around it. Here's what's genuinely uncertain. The conference board's preview confirmed the Fed is widely expected to remove the easing bias language that's been sitting in FOMC statements for months. Language that signaled the committee lean toward future cuts. Dropping that phrase, even while holding the rate steady, is a meaningfully hawkish signal. Tech Times reported that Bank of America is flagging at least 3 FOMC members projecting actual 2026 rate hikes, not holds, hikes, which would be a dramatic shift from where this committee stood even 3 months ago. And Duke University's survey of 34 former Fed officials and staff, conducted between June 5th and 12th, found 17 of 32 respondents who offered a projection said a rate increase would likely be appropriate in 2026. 14 said no change. 1 said cut. That's the professional consensus among people who used to run this institution. More think a hike is coming than think it isn't. Warsh inherited an April meeting that ended in an 8-4 vote, the most divided FOMC decision since October 1992. 3 members objected to the very language suggesting eventual cuts. One governor, Miran, voted for an actual 25 basis point cut. That fracture is now Warsh's to manage, on day 1 in front of cameras. What makes this genuinely complicated is Warsh's own stated philosophy. He told the IMF the central bank should find comfort working without applause and without the audience at the edge of its seats. At his confirmation hearing, he said he wants messier meetings with a good family fight. He's reportedly considering cutting FOMC meetings from 8 a year to as few as 4, and ending the practice of a press conference after every single meeting. That is a fundamental change to how the Fed communicates with markets, and it's coming from a man Trump nominated specifically because he expected alignment on rate cuts. Here's the tension nobody's naming directly. Trump wants lower rates before the midterms, based on his 2008 financial crisis record of dissenting against rate cuts he thought would reignite inflation, is a committed hawk. The Iran deal, assuming it actually holds, which is the subject of the next story, is supposed to ease energy prices and give the Fed room to cut later this year. The conference board's preview suggested Warsh might use the deal as cover to shift focus toward revamping communication, rather than rates. That reading assumes the deal is real and durable enough to take inflation off the table. Watch what Warsh actually says about the deal's credibility at 2:30. If he treats it as settled, that's dovish. If he hedges, citing the operational reality that oil supply normalization takes months, not days, that's the more honest answer, and the more hawkish one. Because the gap between what Trump is saying and what everyone else involved is saying has become impossible to ignore. Trump arrived in Geneva for the G7 summit and told reporters, quote, "The deal's all signed and the strait is already partially opened," confirmed by multiple outlets covering his arrival. Compare that to what Iranian President Pezeshkian wrote the same day. The signing was an important step, but a final agreement for a lasting truce has yet to take shape. Those are not compatible descriptions of the same event. One side is saying it's done. The other side, the one that actually has to ratify it domestically, is saying it's a step towards something that doesn't exist yet. Vice President Vance gave CNN the detail that explains the gap. The memorandum to be signed in Geneva is about 1.5 pages. It is a very general document, Vance said. A page and a half. After 4 months of war, after 4.2% inflation, after a 104-day diplomatic process that's been announced and walked back repeatedly, the actual signed instrument is a page and a half of general language, with the nuclear question, the missile program, and the proxy network all deferred to 60 days of follow-on talks that haven't started yet. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, one of the only people at the G7 not directly involved in the negotiation, gave the most useful independent assessment anyone's offered. He confirmed he'd seen the agreement and called it absolutely acceptable, but described it specifically as establishing a ceasefire for that 60-day period, with conditions attached to what happens when they are fulfilled. Carney also flagged something the celebratory coverage keeps skipping. There's a big financial incentive for Iran to actually perform, meaning the money doesn't flow unless Iran clears mines and engages seriously on uranium. That's a conditional document, not a finished one. It's an agreement to negotiate, with a payment structure attached. And then there's Lebanon, which the G7's own statement this week makes clear is not resolved by anything signed in Geneva. The G7 leaders backed an immediate, robust ceasefire in Lebanon and the disarmament of Hezbollah, phrasing that's been used for over a year without producing disarmament. Israel's government said this week that Hezbollah's efforts so far are encouraging but far from sufficient, citing what it calls Hezbollah's ongoing rearmament with Iranian support south of the Litani River. Israel has withdrawn from all but 5 strategic positions in southern Lebanon and continues conducting strikes it says are ceasefire enforcement. None of that stops on Friday. None of that is covered by a page-and-a-half memorandum signed in Switzerland. CNN's intelligence assessment from inside the G7 coverage is the sentence that should be in every story about this deal and currently is in almost none of them. U.S. assessments now conclude that Iran possesses the capability to close the Strait of Hormuz at will, meaning the war didn't eliminate that leverage. It confirmed and demonstrated it. Whatever Friday's ceremony produces, Iran walks away from this conflict, having proven it can shut down roughly a fifth of global oil flow whenever it decides to. That capability existed before February. The war didn't remove it. If anything, 4 months of active conflict around the strait gave Iran a live demonstration of exactly how much leverage that choke point gives it. And now the story that should be generating far more outrage than it currently is. Iran's national soccer team played New Zealand at SoFi Stadium in their World Cup opener, a 2-2 draw, in front of a crowd that included hundreds of Iranian-American protesters outside the stadium and inside, fans who booed during the national anthem alongside others who cheered the players for 90 straight minutes. Iran's pre-revolutionary lion and sun flag was visible throughout the crowd, despite FIFA's attempt to ban it. An emergency hearing upheld that ban the morning of the match, and fans brought the flags anyway. After the final whistle, Iran's coach Amir Galinaue said his team was ordered to leave the United States within hours. They didn't even give us time to recover, he told reporters through an interpreter. After the game today, they said to us, "You have to leave immediately." The plan had been for the team to stay overnight in the Los Angeles area and return to their training base in Tijuana the next afternoon. Instead, they were put back on the road that evening. Captain Mehdi Taremi said the trip, normally a short hop between Tijuana and LA, took 5 hours each way because of security checks. "We don't know why they are returning us, to be honest," Galinaue said. "It seems like others are doing the planning for us. The decision-making for us is being made elsewhere." On Tuesday, White House FIFA Task Force Director Andrew Giuliani confirmed to the Associated Press that this isn't a one-time event. It's the standing policy. Iran's team will have to leave the United States within hours of every match they play in Los Angeles or Seattle for the entire tournament. "We were clear this was the process," Giuliani said. When asked why some Iranian team officials and support staff were denied entry altogether, he pointed to Secretary of State Rubio's previous statement that anyone with direct ties to Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps would not be allowed in the country, and they're not going to let the World Cup be the reason why they can come in. I want to sit with what that policy actually requires: a professional athletic delegation. Players who qualified through legitimate competition, who have no individual responsibility for their government's military or nuclear decisions, is required to cross an international border twice, undergo 5 hours of security screening each direction, play a World Cup match under that physical and psychological load, and then immediately reverse the entire process with zero recovery time, as a blanket national policy applied before they've even arrived for their first game. Galinaue's quote deserves to be heard plainly. I think our team is perhaps the most oppressed in the World Cup. There may be a genuine national security justification for screening specific individuals tied to the IRGC. That's a real policy question, and Rubio's stated position on IRGC-linked individuals is at least coherent on its face. What that doesn't explain is why the entire delegation, under FIFA accreditation, under international tournament protocols designed precisely to depoliticize athletic competition, has to be expelled within hours of every match, with no overnight stay, regardless of who specifically was or wasn't allowed to enter. That's not a security screening protocol. That's a punitive travel condition applied to athletes because of who their government is, dressed in the language of security review. FIFA's own emergency hearing upheld the flag ban the morning of the match, but said nothing about the travel conditions. Infantino, who has cultivated an unusually close relationship with Trump throughout this tournament cycle, has not publicly addressed the 5-hour security gauntlet or the same-night expulsion policy. The organization, whose entire stated mission is keeping politics out of competition, has been silent on the one policy this week that most directly subordinates athletic logistics to a live diplomatic conflict. Iran's next match is Sunday against Belgium, back at the same stadium in Inglewood. The same travel conditions apply. The same 5 hours each way, the same-night expulsion. This is now the standing operating procedure for an entire nation's Olympic-tier athletes, for the duration of their World Cup participation, confirmed on the record by the White House. The Fed makes its decision in a few hours, and the real signal isn't the rate. It's whether Warsh treats a 1.5-page memorandum as durable enough to change his inflation outlook. The Iran deal is being described by the U.S. president as fully signed, and by Iran's own president as not yet formed. And the document itself is short enough to read in the time it takes to order coffee. And an entire national soccer delegation is being put through 5-hour security gauntlets and same-night expulsions as standing policy. For athletes who didn't start the war, they're being made to physically carry the weight of. What connects all three is the same gap this whole month has been about. The description of the situation and the operational reality of the situation are not the same document. Trump saying signed, Iran saying not yet, the Fed saying maybe, and the athletes in the middle of it are saying plainly that nobody bothered to tell them why.